To save his reputation, the Millionaire CEO married his private nurse, but her secret changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain drizzled against the glass walls of the café, tracing thin silver lines that blurred the city lights beyond. Inside, the warm hum of jazz filled the air. The place smelled of espresso and wet pavement, a refuge for people who wanted to disappear for a while. Amelia sat at a corner table, her nurse's badge still clipped to her wrinkled scrubs. Her eyes were tired, her fingers trembling slightly, as she wrapped them around a lukewarm cup of coffee she could barely afford. It had been 48 hours since the hospital had suspended her. 48 hours since her patient had accused her of something she had not done. The door opened. A man stepped in, tall, tailored, deliberate. Every head seemed to turn as if the air itself shifted with him. His suit was dark charcoal, his shoes perfectly shined, his expression unreadable. Amelia looked up and froze. Ethan Cole, the youngest CEO in the city, the man whose accident she had once nursed him through in the ICU. The same man whose company now dominated every financial headline. He spotted her instantly, no hesitation. He walked straight toward her table. She started to rise, but his calm, commanding voice stopped her mid-movement. "Miss Hayes," he said, his tone low but precise. "I have a proposal for you." Her heartbeat quickened. "A proposal?" she repeated. "About what?" He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, placing a leather folder on the table between them. The soft thud sounded heavier than it should. "My reputation," he said simply, "and yours." Amelia frowned. "I do not understand." Ethan opened the folder, sliding a few papers toward her. On top was a contract official, stamped, impossible to misread. She caught glimpses of words like marriage license, agreement term, public announcement. "I need to restore my public image," he continued. "The board is pressuring me to prove stability, commitment, integrity. They need to see a man who believes in something more than numbers. You were there when I was at my worst. The media already knows your name." Her stomach twisted. "You are asking me to pretend to be your wife?" He nodded once. "For 6 months. After that you will be free. I will settle your debts, clear your record, and make sure you never have to worry about work again." Amelia blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You cannot be serious." Ethan's gaze softened, just for a moment, like a crack in ice. "Do I look like a man who jokes about business?" She looked down at the papers, her reflection trembling on the glossy surface. The rain outside hit harder, thunder rumbling in the distance. "Why me?" she whispered. He leaned back slightly. "Because you are honest. Because you did not sell my hospital photos to the tabloids when you could have made a fortune. And because people already believe something happened between us. This makes it official on paper, at least." Amelia's throat tightened. She thought of her landlord's warnings, her mother's hospital bills still unpaid, the humiliation of being called a liar by the hospital board. 6 months could save everything. Or destroy her completely. Ethan checked his watch. "I will give you 24 hours to decide." He stood, sliding the folder closer to her side of the table. "If you choose yes, meet me at the courthouse at noon tomorrow." His voice lowered as he added, "If not, tear it up and forget this ever happened." He turned and walked out, his reflection swallowed by the rain-streaked glass. Amelia sat motionless, the café sounds fading into a dull hum. She opened the folder again, staring at the signature line waiting at the bottom. Her name looked small on the paper, but the promise behind it could change her life forever. The rain outside did not stop. It only grew louder as if the world itself was waiting for her answer. Amelia did not sleep that night. The folder lay open on her kitchen table, its pages spread like a quiet storm. Every few minutes she would read the first line again, as if the words might suddenly change. Marriage contract, term, 6 months. The city outside hummed, traffic rolling through puddles, thunder far in the distance. By dawn, her mind was empty. The coffee had gone cold. She caught her reflection in the window and whispered, "What am I doing?" But she already knew. When the morning light crept through the blinds, Amelia Hayes packed the folder into her worn leather bag and headed out. The courthouse sat on the corner of Fifth Avenue, its marble steps slick with rain. The air smelled faintly of wet stone and exhaust. Ethan Cole was already there, standing beside a black sedan. His suit was sharp, but his expression unreadable. "You came," he said simply. Amelia nodded, clutching the folder to her chest. "You said noon." He opened the car door. "Let us get this over with." The drive was silent. Rain drummed softly against the windows as the city blurred by. Amelia stared at her hands, every nerve alive. Ethan glanced at her once, but said nothing. The air between them was heavy with things unsaid. Inside the courthouse, the clerk barely looked up as they signed the documents. The room smelled of old paper and lemon polish. Amelia's hand trembled as she wrote her name on the dotted line, black ink spreading slightly on the crisp page. Ethan's signature followed, precise and practiced. The clerk stamped the papers, the sound sharp and final. "That is it," Ethan said. "We are officially married." Amelia tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. So quickly. He turned toward her, his gaze steady. It was never meant to be complicated. They stepped back into the gray afternoon. Reporters had not been alerted, no cameras, no champagne. Just rain, the smell of the street, and two people bound by ink instead of love. Ethan's driver opened the door. "Take her to the residence," Ethan instructed. Amelia blinked. "Residence?" "My penthouse," he said. "It will look suspicious if you do not live with me." The city rose around them like a wall of glass and steel as they drove. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Amelia's breath caught. The apartment was vast and gleaming, all chrome and light. Windows stretched floor to ceiling, showing the skyline like a painting. "This is it," she began, but words failed her. "Home," Ethan finished, though his tone was detached. "You will have your own room, the staff has been informed." A woman in her 40s appeared, dressed in a crisp uniform. "Mrs. Cole," she greeted warmly, handing Amelia a keycard. The title made Amelia flinch. "Thank you," she murmured, unsure where to look. Ethan crossed the room and placed a small velvet box on the counter. "You will need this for appearances. You go." Inside was a diamond ring that caught the light like a small flame. It looked impossibly expensive, almost unreal. "I cannot wear this," she said quietly. "You must," Ethan replied. "People expect proof." He paused, his expression softening just a fraction. "You will get used to it." For a long moment they stood there, the sound of rain still echoing faintly through the glass. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He turned away, voice firm again. "I have meetings. Dinner is at 7. We will attend a charity event tomorrow night. Be ready." He walked toward the door, pausing only to say, "Try to smile when you can. It helps the illusion." Then he was gone. Amelia stood alone in the wide, silent penthouse. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It was heavy, cold at first, but it fit perfectly, almost too perfectly. She turned toward the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Below, the city pulsed with life, unaware of the strange marriage that had just begun high above it. She wandered through the apartment, fingertips brushing the smooth marble counters, the tall shelves lined with untouched books, the empty piano collecting dust. Every detail whispered of wealth and isolation. In the bedroom prepared for her, there was a bouquet of white lilies on the nightstand and a note in Ethan's clean handwriting. "Welcome to our arrangement. Rest well." She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the words. There was no warmth in them, only precision. Still, something inside her ached at the thought that he had written it himself. Amelia closed her eyes. The hum of the city below rose like a heartbeat. Somewhere beyond the glass walls, people laughed, cabs honked, life continued. But for her, time had slowed into something fragile and uncertain. She whispered to the empty room, 6 months. Call low. The words hung in the air like a vow and a warning all at once. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, sharp and white against the marble floor. Amelia woke up in a bed too large, in a room too silent. The city skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass, as if the world itself was reminding her how small she truly was. Downstairs, the smell of fresh coffee greeted her. A maid smiled politely and gestured toward the dining table. Everything looked perfectly arranged: silver cutlery, crystal glasses, a folded newspaper beside a plate of fruit. But the seat across from hers was empty. Ethan Cole was already gone. A note lay under the coffee cup, written in his clean, firm handwriting. "Breakfast at 7, meeting at 9. Do not wait for me. There is a charity event this evening, black dress, minimal jewelry. Remember, Mrs. Cole always smiles. She let out a small, humorless laugh. Mrs. Cole, she whispered, as if the name belonged to someone else. The day passed in slow motion. She explored the penthouse, learning its silence. Every room looked staged for a magazine cover, but none felt lived in. She touched the piano keys, dust stirred. No sound followed. In the office, she found a shelf of family photographs, but every frame held only Ethan alone, at award ceremonies, beside business partners, shaking hands under bright lights. No parents, no friends, no one who smiled for real. By late afternoon, a stylist arrived, polite but efficient, carrying boxes of gowns and shoes. "Mr. Cole prefers classic cuts," the woman said while adjusting the dress on Amelia's shoulders. Understated, but elegant. Amelia nodded quietly. Her reflection in the mirror startled her. The nurse from the hospital was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked like she belonged to another world, a world of chandeliers, luxury cars, and silent dinners. When Ethan returned that evening, he paused in the doorway. For the first time, his eyes softened. "You look appropriate," he said after a moment, but the faint catch in his tone betrayed something else. "Thank you," she answered. "I suppose this is what you meant by appearances." He gave a small nod, offering his arm. Ready to play the part? The charity event was held in a grand ballroom filled with gold light and perfume. The crowd buzzed with laughter, cameras flashing like lightning. As they entered, a dozen heads turned. Ethan Cole, the elusive CEO, arriving with his new wife. "Smile," he murmured under his breath. "Everyone is watching." Amelia forced a gentle smile, her heart pounding. Reporters swarmed, asking questions about their whirlwind romance. Ethan handled them with effortless charm, never breaking his composure. When one journalist asked how they met, Amelia hesitated, then said softly, "At the hospital. I was there when he needed someone the most." Ethan looked at her then, not as the businessman guarding his image, but as a man momentarily caught off guard. He quickly recovered, thanking the reporters and leading her away toward a quieter corner. "You spoke well," he said, voice low. "You almost made it sound believable." "Lou, it is supposed to sound believable," she replied. "That is the whole point, is it not?" He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering behind his calm eyes. Perhaps. Dinner was long and formal. Amelia followed every cue he gave her, a glance, a nod, a quiet correction. Still, she noticed the way people whispered when she passed. To them, she was the mystery wife, the woman who had appeared from nowhere. She felt the weight of their stares, the hum of judgment beneath the music. When the speeches ended, she excused herself and stepped out onto the terrace. Cool air brushed her skin, carrying the faint scent of rain from the night before. The city below shimmered with light. She gripped the railing, breathing deeply, trying to remember who she had been before this contract. Behind her, footsteps approached. Ethan joined her, his tie loosened, his expression finally stripped of the usual mask. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said quietly. She turned to him. "I felt like an actress reciting lines." "That is what this is," he replied. "A performance. The better we act, the faster it will end." "Does it ever bother you?" she asked, "pretending to be something you are not?" He looked out at the city. "All the time." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind lifted her hair. His gaze lingered on her, softer now, less guarded. When a flashbulb flickered from the ballroom, he straightened again, slipping the mask back into place. "We should go," he said. "People will notice if we disappear too long." As they re-entered the golden light of the hall, Amelia caught their reflection in the mirrored wall, two figures walking side by side, smiling for the cameras, bound together by a lie that was beginning to feel dangerously real. Later that night, when she returned to her room, she found a single glass of champagne waiting on her nightstand, and another brief note in his handwriting. "You did well tonight. Thank you." She set the note down beside the first one and whispered into the silence, "Maybe pretending is easier for you." But deep down, she knew it was not. Because when he looked at her across the ballroom, there had been a flicker, just a flicker of truth. And that was far more dangerous than any lie they had agreed to live. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of their arrangement settled like clockwork. Each morning, Ethan left before sunrise, his routine precise, his words minimal. Each evening, Amelia joined him at dinners, charity events, and board functions, smiling on cue, shaking hands with people who looked at her with polite curiosity and quiet disbelief. To the outside world, they were perfect, polished, successful, enviable. But behind the glass walls of the penthouse, Silence filled the space between them like fog. Amelia spent most days alone, reading medical journals, watering the plants that the housekeeper always forgot. Sometimes she would catch herself waiting for the sound of his key in the lock. But when he finally came home, exhaustion and distance hung around him like armor. One afternoon, she heard his voice echoing down the hallway, clipped and sharp. He was on the phone, pacing near the window. "No," he said firmly. "We are not delaying the merger. Handle the press and keep the board out of it." When he ended the call, he turned and froze. Amelia stood there, holding a cup of tea. For a second, the mask of the CEO slipped, replaced by something weary and human. "Rough day?" she asked quietly. He gave a dry laugh. "That is one way to put it." Without thinking, she handed him the tea. He hesitated, then accepted it. "Thank you," he said softly, almost as if he was not used to saying the words. "You know," she began, "you do not always have to handle everything alone." His eyes lifted to hers. "It is easier that way. No one gets hurt." But you do," she said before she could stop herself. He stared at her for a moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he looked away. "You should get ready. We have a dinner tonight." That evening, the event was smaller, an investors gathering in a candlelit restaurant. The air was thick with perfume and the sound of laughter. Amelia stayed close to Ethan, following his lead, answering questions with gentle smiles. Halfway through dinner, one of the investors leaned forward, smirking. "You married quickly, Cole." Everyone was surprised. Ethan raised his glass. "When you meet someone who makes you stop thinking about the next deal, it happens fast." Laughter rippled through the table. But when his eyes met Amelia's, there was a strange glint, half challenge, half sincerity. "Tell us, Mrs. Cole," another guest asked. "What made you fall for him?" Amelia froze for a second, the question slicing through her rehearsed calm. Ethan's hand brushed against hers under the table, steadying her. "I suppose," she said softly, "it was the way he pretended not to care, but still noticed everything, even when I thought no one did." The table fell quiet for a moment, then someone changed the subject. But Ethan did not look away. He kept his gaze on her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. When the dinner ended, they stepped outside into the cool night. The valet brought the car around, headlights cutting through the drizzle. As they waited, Ethan spoke without turning toward her. "You were not supposed to say that." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it was true." He looked at her then, really looked. "You are making this complicated." "Maybe it already was," she replied. The drive home was silent, but the air between them pulsed with something new, something neither of them wanted to name. Later that night, Amelia found him on the rooftop terrace, standing by the edge, city lights reflecting in his eyes. She hesitated before joining him. "You always come up here when you cannot sleep?" she asked. "Only when the noise gets too loud." "Noise?" He tapped his chest lightly. "In here." The wind carried her hair across her face. Without thinking, he reached out, brushing it aside. His hand lingered for a second too long, and she did not pull away. "I know this is just a contract," she said quietly, "but sometimes I forget." He exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a confession. "So do I." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The city stretched endlessly below them, a constellation of human stories they would never know. And on that rooftop, between two people bound by paper but undone by truth, something fragile began to bloom. Then, as if remembering himself, Ethan stepped back. His voice turned steady again. "Get some rest, Amelia. Tomorrow we'll be busy." She nodded, but when he walked away, she could still feel the warmth of his touch lingering against her skin. Inside her room, she took off the diamond ring and placed it on the nightstand. It glimmered under the lamplight, cold and beautiful, just like the life she was now living. But deep down, she knew that something had shifted, and no contract in the world could undo it. The next morning, Amelia woke before dawn. The rain had stopped, leaving the skyline washed in pale silver light. She made coffee in the quiet kitchen, the steady drip of the machine echoing like a metronome in the empty room. The city below was still half asleep, but inside the penthouse, her thoughts were loud. She could still feel the warmth of Ethan's hand brushing her hair on the rooftop the night before. It had been a fleeting moment, but it refused to fade. She told herself it was nothing, just part of the act. Yet every time she looked at the ring glinting on her finger, her pulse betrayed her. At 7 sharp, Ethan walked into the kitchen, dressed for work. His tie was perfect, his composure restored, but his eyes hesitated when they met hers. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, trying to sound casual. He poured himself a cup of coffee, For a moment they stood side by side in silence, both pretending not to remember the rooftop. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "There is a board luncheon today. You should come. It will help with optics." "Optics," she repeated softly, smiling a little. "Yes, Mr. Cole." He glanced at her. "You can drop the mister when we are home." She tilted her head. "And when are we ever home, really?" He had no answer for that. Later that afternoon, the luncheon took place at a glass-walled restaurant overlooking the river. The entire board of Cole Industries was there, power suits, expensive watches, polite smiles that hid sharper edges. Amelia sat beside Ethan, doing her best to appear calm. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Gregory Harlan, raised his glass. "To Mr. Cole," he said with a grin, "and to his beautiful wife. You have certainly improved our public image, my dear." The table laughed. Amelia forced a polite smile, but under the table, her hands tightened into fists. Ethan noticed. His hand brushed against hers, subtle but grounding. "Thank you," Amelia said evenly. "I am glad to help, in whatever way I can." As the conversation drifted toward business, she felt the sharp contrast between their worlds. The men spoke in millions, mergers, and market shares words that floated far above her reach. Still, Ethan's gaze found her every so often, softening just enough to make her chest ache. When the luncheon ended, the photographers outside swarmed them. Flashes went off, questions overlapping. One reporter shouted, "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to finally settle down?" Ethan smiled, his hand resting lightly on Amelia's back. "It feels right," he said. "Sometimes, the best decisions are the unexpected ones." The crowd laughed, and for a second, even Amelia believed him. That evening, back at the penthouse, she changed into her usual clothes and stepped out onto the balcony. The wind was cool, carrying the faint hum of the city below. She heard Ethan come in behind her, the door sliding shut softly. "You handled the press well today," he said. "Thank you," she replied without turning. "I am getting used to being someone else." Calm. He walked closer. "You were not someone else. You were exactly who you needed to be." She looked at him then, her voice barely above a whisper. "And who are you when no one is watching, Ethan?" He hesitated. "Someone who wishes he could stop pretending too." The space between them felt fragile, electric. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the loneliness hidden behind his polished exterior. And for the first time, she saw not the CEO but the man. "Tell me something true," she said softly. He paused, his jaw tightening. Then, almost reluctantly, he spoke. "I never believed in marriage. Not until you signed that paper." Her breath caught. "That was not real." "Maybe not," he said, stepping closer. "But it feels real." The air stilled. She could hear the faint rhythm of his heartbeat, the rush of her own. But before either of them could speak again, Ethan's phone buzzed sharply, breaking the moment. He answered it, his tone instantly professional. "Yes. I will be there in 20 minutes." He ended the call and looked at her, the walls rebuilding in his eyes. "There is an emergency meeting. We will talk later." When he left, the silence returned heavy, aching. Amelia leaned against the balcony railing, staring at the city that glittered beneath her like a sea of distant stars. She whispered to herself, this was supposed to be simple. Inside, on the marble counter, Ethan's phone buzzed again. A message flashed across the screen before it dimmed. The sender's name glowed for a brief second, Victoria Lang, and the words beneath it made Amelia's stomach twist when she saw them later that night. "We need to talk about what you are hiding, before she finds out." Amelia's heart pounded as the meaning sank in. She looked toward the door where Ethan had stood hours before and felt a chill run through her. The marriage may have started as a lie, but now she could feel the real secret looming, one that might destroy everything they had begun to believe was real. That night, sleep refused to come. Amelia lay awake, the city lights flickering through the curtains like restless thoughts. The message from Victoria Lang burned in her mind. "We need to talk about what you are hiding, before she finds out." Those words felt like a cold hand on her chest. By morning, Ethan was gone again, leaving nothing but a note on the kitchen counter. "Early meeting. Do not wait for me." It was his usual handwriting, controlled, distant, but now, every letter seemed like a wall between them. Amelia stared at the note for a long time before turning to the window. The city looked the same as always, towers of glass, people rushing, the illusion of normal life. But under that polished surface, something dark was waiting. She could feel it. Her curiosity became impossible to silence. She told herself it was not about jealousy, it was about truth. She needed to know what Ethan was hiding. Later that day, when the housekeeper brought in fresh flowers, Amelia noticed a folder peeking out from Ethan's briefcase left on the sofa. She hesitated, then reached for it. Inside were documents marked Confidential Coal Industries Internal Investigation. The words blurred as she read them. The file mentioned a lawsuit tied to the hospital where Ethan's company had donated medical equipment 2 years ago. The case involved a patient who had died after a machine failure. The same patient, she realized with a sinking heart, was her former guardian, Mr. Hayes, the man she had once called father. Her knees weakened. The machine that had malfunctioned came from Ethan's corporation. The company had quietly settled the case, clearing him of liability. But it was not just business. It was personal. Her last family had died because of something his company created. Amelia closed the folder with trembling hands, her chest tight. Now she understood the unease in his eyes, the strange tension whenever the past was mentioned. He knew. Ethan had known who she was from the start. When the elevator doors opened that evening, she was waiting for him. He stepped inside, his usual calm fading when he saw her face. "Amelia," he said carefully. "What is wrong?" She held up the folder. "You tell me?" He froze. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the city outside the glass walls. "Where did you get that?" he asked finally. "Does it matter?" she replied. "You knew about my father? You knew before you ever asked me to marry you." His jaw tightened. "It was complicated." "Complicated?" Her voice shook. "You lied to me. Every day you looked me in the eyes and pretended this was just business. But it was not, was it? You married me to bury your guilt." "That is not true," he said sharply, stepping closer. "I tried to tell you. I wanted to, but what?" she demanded. "You were afraid I would hate you?" He looked at her then, raw and unguarded. "Yes." The honesty in his voice hit her harder than any lie could. He ran a hand through his hair, the perfect CEO facade breaking apart. "I found out who you were after the accident," he said quietly. "I was the one who approved the equipment at the hospital. I blamed myself for years. When I saw you again, I thought it was fate giving me a chance to make things right. By marrying me under false pretenses? I did not plan it that way at first," he said. "But when the board pushed me into finding a way to restore my image, I saw a chance to protect you and myself. I thought I could fix both." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "You cannot fix people like they are numbers on a balance sheet." "I know," he said softly. "And that is what terrifies me the most." For a long moment they stood facing each other, the silence stretching heavy and painful. Then Amelia took off her wedding ring and placed it on the table. "This was never real," she said, her voice breaking. "But the one thing that was real, you ruined it yourself." She turned toward the door, but Ethan caught her wrist. "Amelia, please. I did not want to hurt you." She pulled away, her eyes burning. "Then you should not have chosen me as your redemption." She left the penthouse without another word. The elevator doors closed behind her with a dull metallic thud, echoing through the empty space like a final sentence. Ethan stood there alone, the ring gleaming under the dim light. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and for the first time in years, the man who controlled everything felt completely powerless. Down on the street, Amelia stepped into the rain, her tears mixing with the cold drops that blurred the city lights. The contract was still legally binding, but her heart was free and broken. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. "You deserve to know the whole truth. Meet me tomorrow at the old hospital midnight." Amelia stared at the screen, her breath catching. The sender was Victoria Lang, and in that moment she realized that whatever secret Ethan was hiding went deeper than she had imagined. The truth was waiting, and it would not be gentle. The rain returned that night, soft but relentless, tapping against the windshield of the cab as Amelia rode through the sleeping city. Midnight drew closer, and the streets around the old hospital looked abandoned, windows boarded, lights flickering weakly in the drizzle. She stepped out, her coat pulled tight, heart hammering against her ribs. Victoria Lang was already there, waiting beneath the awning near the entrance. The woman's face was sharp and elegant, the kind of beauty that came with power. Amelia had seen her name before in the news, Ethan's legal advisor, once rumored to be more than that. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said. Her tone was calm, but her eyes darted toward the shadows as if they were being watched. "Why did you call me?" Amelia asked, keeping her voice steady. Victoria hesitated, then held up a flash drive. "Because you deserve the truth. Ethan Cole was not the one responsible for your father's death. But someone in his company was, and they made sure he would never find out." Amelia frowned. "Who?" Victoria took a step closer, her voice low. "Gregory Harlan, the board chairman. He authorized cheaper replacement parts for the hospital machines, behind Ethan's back. When the failure happened, he buried the report and pinned it on Ethan to manipulate him later. Your marriage was supposed to make you a distraction. The words hit Amelia like a wave of cold air. You are lying, she whispered. Victoria shook her head. I wish I were. Ethan found out a week ago. He has been gathering evidence to expose Gregory. But he knows the moment he goes public, the company will collapse. He is trying to protect everyone, including you. Amelia's breath caught. The anger that had burned in her chest for days began to twist into something heavier: guilt, confusion, disbelief. Why tell me this? She asked. Because I am leaving, Victoria said quietly. And because he will not ask for forgiveness, even when he deserves it. That is who he is. Before Amelia could respond, headlights swept across the parking lot. A black sedan pulled up fast, tires splashing through the puddles. Ethan stepped out, rain soaking through his coat, his expression a storm of worry and frustration. Amelia, he called, striding toward her. What are you doing here? It is not safe. She turned to face him, her voice shaking. Then tell me the truth. Did you know about Gregory? His eyes widened in surprise, then softened. Yes, he said finally. I found out after you left. I was going to tell you when I had proof. Victoria pressed the flash drive into Amelia's hand. Now you both have it, she said quietly. Use it before it is too late. Then she turned and disappeared into the night. Ethan exhaled, the weight of everything in his shoulders. You should not have come here, he said softly. I had to, she replied, because despite everything, I needed to know who you really are. He stepped closer, rain running down his face. Then look at me, Amelia. This is who I am, a man who made mistakes, but I am done hiding. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence, the city's heartbeat in the distance. She looked into his eyes and saw not the CEO from the headlines, but the man who had stood in her hospital room years ago, broken and human. Tomorrow, he said, I will face the board, no more lies. Amelia nodded slowly. The flash drive clutched tightly in her hand. Somewhere deep inside, the wall between them began to crack, not with trust yet, but with the possibility of it. And for the first time she believed that the truth might save them both. Morning came gray and heavy, clouds hanging low over the city. Amelia had barely slept. The flash drive lay on the table beside a cup of untouched coffee, a tiny object holding the weight of everything that had broken between them. When Ethan emerged from his office, he looked like a man carrying a lifetime on his shoulders. His tie was slightly loosened, his eyes shadowed, but his voice was steady. The board meeting starts at 10, he said. You do not have to come. She looked up at him, her tone quiet but firm. Yes, I do. If this ends today, I want to see it. For a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded once. All right. But whatever happens in that room, remember that I never wanted you to pay the price for my mistakes. They arrived at the Coal Industries Tower together, stepping into the glass elevator that climbed toward the top floor. Reporters filled the lobby below, shouting questions through the rain-slicked doors, their flashes lighting up the marble floor like bursts of lightning. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick with tension. Gregory Harlan sat at the head of the long table, smiling the way powerful men do when they think they have already won. Ethan, he said smoothly, I did not expect you to bring your wife. This is a business discussion. Ethan placed a folder on the table, his voice calm. Then it is time to discuss the truth. Gregory's smile faltered. What truth would that be? Ethan opened the folder and set down a printed report, the one from the flash drive, the hospital machines, the defective parts, the forged approval documents with your signature. A murmur spread across the room. The board members leaned forward, whispers turning sharp. Gregory's expression darkened. You have no proof this came from me. Ethan met his gaze. Actually, I have everything I need, including the internal emails you sent, to cover it up. He turned toward the projection screen. The security team connected the flash drive, and the documents appeared timestamps, signatures, even recorded conversations that Victoria had saved. The evidence was undeniable. Gregory shot to his feet. You think this will save you? Exposing this will destroy your company. Ethan's reply was calm but resolute. Maybe, but at least the truth will not destroy anyone else. Silence fell. The room seemed to breathe as one, stunned by what had just unfolded. Then one of the board members stood. I move to remove Gregory Harlan effective immediately, she said, for breach of ethics and criminal misconduct. The motion passed within minutes. Gregory's face turned pale as security escorted him out, his empire crumbling behind him. Ethan exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He looked at Amelia across the room. There was no triumph in his eyes, only relief. "It is done," he said softly. She walked toward him, her voice trembling but steady. "You did what was right." He nodded. "I should have done it sooner." Outside, the rain began to clear, sunlight breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. The board members filed out quietly, leaving the two of them alone in the empty room. Ethan stepped closer. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. "But I need you to know everything I did from here on is for the truth, not for redemption." Lo, Amelia's eyes glistened. "Maybe that is enough." For a long moment, they stood in the quiet hum of the city far below. The weight of lies finally lifted. Somewhere deep inside, a fragile peace began to form, not perfect, but real. And when they left the building hand in hand, the world outside no longer looked like the same place where their story had begun. Weeks passed, and the storm that had once surrounded their names slowly faded from the headlines. The media moved on. The public found new scandals to chase, and Coal Industries began rebuilding its image under Ethan's quieter, humbler leadership. For the first time in years, his office felt like more than a fortress. It felt human. Amelia had returned to the hospital, not as a nurse this time, but as a coordinator for the new patient care foundation Ethan had created in her father's name. Every day she worked with doctors and volunteers to provide free treatment for families who could not afford care. Her days were long but full of meaning, her heart lighter than it had been in years. One late afternoon, as the golden light spilled across the city skyline, Ethan arrived at the hospital garden where she was finishing her rounds. The roses had just begun to bloom again, their colors bright against the fading day. He stood there for a moment, watching her laugh with a child, his eyes soft in a way they had never been before. When she finally noticed him, she smiled. "You came without a meeting on your calendar. Should I be worried?" He shook his head. "No meetings today. Just something I should have done a long time ago." He reached into his pocket and took out a small velvet box, the same one that had once held a ring symbolizing their fake marriage. The difference now was that there was no contract, no cameras, no audience, only them. "Amelia," he said quietly, "we started with a lie, and somehow it led us here. I do not deserve another chance, but I am asking for one anyway. Not to fix what we broke, just to begin honestly this time." She looked down at the ring, her eyes filling with tears. "You know," she said softly, "I kept waiting for the day this story would end. But maybe it was never meant to end. Maybe it was meant to start over." He smiled, stepping closer. "Then start with me." She nodded, and when he slipped the ring onto her finger, it no longer felt heavy or cold. It felt alive. They stood there in the garden as the sun dipped behind the city, a warm breeze carrying the scent of new rain and blooming roses. In that moment there were no contracts, no secrets, only two people who had fought their way through pain and truth to find something real. Later that evening, Ethan joined her inside the hospital. Together, they unveiled a new plaque on the foundation wall. The inscription read, "The Hayes Coal Foundation, built on truth, healing, and second chances." As the staff applauded, Amelia looked up at him. "It suits you," she said, smiling. "Finally, something real with your name on it." He leaned close, his voice gentle. "No, Amelia, it suits us." Outside, the first stars began to appear over the city. The same skyline that had once witnessed their lies now shimmered with quiet peace. For the first time, the world felt still. Their story had begun with signatures on paper, but it ended here, with a promise made not out of duty, but out of love. And this time, it was forever.